whole town's batting about Cincinnati. What a team, what a team, what a team. Each man and lady from 1 to 80, how they scream, how they scream, how they scream.
Hello, Reds fans, and welcome to another episode of We Love Our Team. I'm Jack Reiner, here with my partner, Randy Freaking. And today we welcome a legend in the local journalism community, Hal McCoy. Hal has covered the Cincinnati Reds since 1973. He was at the forefront of the Pete Rose investigation, breaking many stories during the 1989 season while also covering the Reds on a daily basis. Hal also covered the infamous reign of former Reds CEO Marge Schott, the 1990 World Champion Reds, multiple baseball strikes, and Reds ownership changes. He's won 52 Ohio and National Writing Awards and was the first non-Cincinnati news person elected to the Cincinnati Journalists Hall of Fame. He's been the Cincinnati Baseball Writers Association of America chapter chair 22 times and was the BBWAA national president in 1977. He is the third writer from the Dayton Daily News to win the Spink Award, joining Cy Burek and Ritter Collett. He was inducted in the National Sports Media Hall of Fame in 2015. In 2016, he was inducted into the Dayton Region Walk of Fame, complete with a sidewalk plaque on Dayton's West 3rd Street. And in 2015, the press box at legendary Howell Field in Dayton was named the Hal McCoy Press Box. And on June 8, 2015, Hal was inducted into the National Sportscasters and Sports Writers Association Hall of Fame. So welcome to We Love Our Team, Hal.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me.
Hey, Hal, you grew up in the Akron, Ohio area. So I'm just wondering how or when you became a Reds fan after growing up in Indians territory.
Well, of course, I was an Indians fan, being from Akron, only 35 miles from Cleveland, and my dad used to take me to old Cleveland Municipal Stadium, and huge Indians fan. I still call them the Indians. I know that's politically incorrect, but they're the Indians to me. And didn't pay much attention to the National League until I graduated from Kent State University in 1962 and got a job at the old Dayton Journal-Herald and started going to Reds games with Ritter Collett, who was covering the Reds at the time. And as you mentioned, he is in the Cooperstown Hall of Fame with me, and became a Reds fan in about 1968, 69 before I started covering them.
Well, you know, Hal, I'm a proud graduate of University of Dayton, and I understand you're a big University of Dayton basketball fan as well. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. As a matter of fact, in the winter, I work for a website called Press Pros Magazine, and I cover all the Flyers games. And that is so much fun because the atmosphere in UD Arena is just fantastic, and it's great to be a part of it.
It really is. So now I thought I heard you say you got out of college and got your job at the Dayton Journal-Herald in about 62, became a Reds fan in 68. So it took like 6 years to bring you over.
Yeah, I kind of followed them. I still followed my Cleveland Indians up until then, but I was covering everything but baseball from 1962 to 68. I covered the Cleveland Browns in 1964. The last time they won a championship, and so I've made an offer to them to come back and cover them again, and maybe they'll make the Super Bowl. But I also covered Ohio State, and I covered the old Cincinnati Royals, and covered a little bit of everything. I covered professional golf and went to the Open and the PGA and the Masters, and I covered auto racing. I covered the Daytona 500 and Indianapolis 500. So before I started covering baseball, I got to do a whole lot of things. And then later on there in the late 60s, I started going to more Reds games and became a big fan of the Reds then.
Now, is baseball your favorite sport, would you say?
Yes, absolutely. My father was a semi-pro pitcher and used to take me to games when I was a kid, and he used to play catch with me in the backyard. And they say I was born to be involved in baseball because my mother took me to one of his games in a baby buggy and parked it behind the screen. and somebody fouled a ball back over the screen, and it landed in my baby buggy, and everybody rushed to the buggy thinking that I might be hurt, and I was holding the baseball. So
That's fantastic. That's
that sailed it.
Did
so.
you end up playing?
Yes, absolutely. I went to Kent State University on a partial baseball scholarship. I played Little League, Pony League, American Legion, high school, and played Kent State my freshman year, and found out in a hurry I couldn't hit the curveball, so I decided to write about it rather than play it.
What position did you play?
First base.
First? Okay. Are you left-handed or?
I am definitely. They might as well cut off my right side because I do everything left-handed. Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yep.
Yeah, that's where the left-handed kids always wound up, either there or pitcher, right?
Pitcher, yeah, or left field or first base. Yep.
Now, how did you get into sports writing?
That's a great story. My senior year in high school, I took a typing class only because it was all girls. And I was seated in my seat one day, and the typing teacher was the advisor for the school newspaper. And she came to me. I also played basketball. And she came to me and said, "How you play on that basketball team, don't you?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, we need somebody to write a story for the school paper, and we don't have anybody to do it. Would you do it?" And I said, "Well, I've never done anything like that in my life, but I'll try." And she said, "Well, you just do it, and we'll fix it up and put it in the paper." So I wrote it, turned it in, and she came to me the next day, and she said, "Did you ever think about going into journalism?" And I said, "No, why?" She said, "Because this was really good, and we didn't have to touch anything."
Wow.
And then I went to got the baseball scholarship and went to Kent State, and I had to declare a major, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I thought of what Mrs. Paciotti had said to me, so okay, journalism. And I started working on the daily Kent Stater newspaper, and that's how it all evolved. And Mrs. Paciotti went to her grave not knowing what she did for me.
What she did for a lot of readers in Dayton and Southwest Ohio. That's we owe her a debt of gratitude. Randy and I went to all boys high school, so we didn't have classes dominated by girls.
That's right, Jack. But I used to I wanted to be a sports journalist as well, Hal. I wrote for the high school newspaper and the magazine, and I wanted to go to sports journalism up at Northwestern University. And
oh yeah,
unfortunately, I couldn't get into Northwestern. I ended up at Dayton, and I screwed around a little bit with the Flyer News.
Flyer News, yep.
But then took a different path.
So how has the business changed, and from the time you started to where you find yourself now? I mean, I would imagine it's just exponentially different than it once was.
Oh, tremendously. When I graduated from Kent State, I had 11 job offers, and I wanted to get into sports, and none of them were in sports. So I took a job at the Fort Wayne News Sentinel as a police reporter. Well, about a week after I accepted that job and before I reported, Ritter Collette called me and said, "We have an opening in sports." And I said, "I'll be there tomorrow." So I had to call Fort Wayne and tell them I wasn't coming, and they were very unhappy, but I was glad I made that decision. But nowadays I'm told there's like one job for 11 journalism graduates. And, the newspaper business is dying. Newspapers are dying. And I am so fortunate that I was there in its heyday, and the Dayton Daily News sent me to every Reds game, road and away, and or home and away. And nowadays, our paper doesn't even travel with the team, doesn't cover it as much. That's the newspaper, the breed is dying, and it's very unfortunate.
Yeah, it's sad.
How I noticed that on your Facebook page, you still cover the Reds, even though you're retired. It's on a volunteer basis, I suppose. But you're a part of the new age of reporting where you can, I don't know if you go to games still, or do you watch and listen and then write your column?
Once in a while I go, but I'm 84 years old, and in Dayton it's an hour. I live north of Dayton in Inglewood, and it's an hour and 15 minutes each way. So I had to leave home at about 1 o'clock. And, of course, I'm legally blind and I can't drive, so I had a driver. and we would go to the games. By the time I wrote and got back home, it was about 1 a.m. So
Mm.
got a bit too much. So since the pandemic, I have not gone to many games, but I watch every game on TV and write about it. Like you say, it's a labor of love. It keeps me young, keeps me going, something to do. People always tell me when I'm going to quit writing, and I always tell them when my head hits the laptop.
Well, I read one of your game stories in which you were able to comment that you thought that Ellie De La Cruz was somewhat selfish when he stole third base. And I'm just wondering if you think you could have done that when you were actually covering the team officially.
I would have done that, yes. I have my incidents in my 50-some years of covering the Reds where I wrote things that players didn't like. Uh, what the thing to do when you do something like that is make sure you show up the next day and give them a chance. Well, I can't do that now, but I know Johnny Bench used to get on my case, but I would show up the next day and he'd let me know what he thought about it, and then things would be fine. But then there was the case of Joe Morgan, where I wrote something about him, and he pointed his finger at my face and said, "Don't ever talk to me again." And we went 35 years without talking. It's unbelievable. We were both very childish.
Wow.
He came back. Well, of course, after I wrote that, it was about him leaving and going to Houston. Of course, he left, but he came back as a broadcaster, and we would see each other, pass each other in the hallway, and not speak. And actually, we played some doubles tennis against each other and still didn't speak. It was really, really, really stupid. But one day, when he came back as an advisor, it was an early Sunday morning, and I was standing by the television in the clubhouse, and it was just Joe and I in the clubhouse, and I had my back to him, and all of a sudden I heard, "Hey, Hal." And I thought, no, that can't be Joe. It's got to be somebody else. So I turned around, and Joe came up to me and stuck out his hand and said, "I want to apologize." He said, "I've been very childish. I was younger then." And I said, "Well, Joe, you can put me on that childish list too, because it was stupid. But I never, ever lost the fact that you were a great player, one of the best I ever saw. And I'm happy that we can make amends."
That's great. That's good that happened before he died.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
That would have been sad had that not happened. So, any memorable stories that you recall breaking in your job?
The best one was I may have been the only sports writer ever to tell a manager he was fired.
Oh, is that right?
We were in St. Louis, and Vern Rapp was managing, and there was some rumors that he might be in trouble. So I called one of the Williams brothers, who owned the team at the time, and he said, "Well, we've let Vern go." I said, "Oh, really?" And I looked down on the field, and Vern was standing by the batting cage in St. Louis, leaning against the cage. So I went down, and I went up to him, and I said, "Vern, I'm sorry to hear you've been fired." And he said, "What?" Turned around and ran to the clubhouse and called a team meeting and told him, "It looks like I'm not going to be with you anymore." So inadvertently, I told Vern Rapp that he was fired.
That is breaking news, man. That is the very definition of breaking news.
That is absolutely. I also
that was Pete replaced him, didn't he?
Yes, that was it. Williams didn't tell me that, but he did tell me that Vern was fired. The other one was when they traded Sean Casey at the winter meetings, and they traded him for a pitcher from Pittsburgh. And I called Sean, and same thing. "Sorry to hear you've been traded." "What? They haven't told me." So there again, I was telling somebody something that they didn't know.
Hey, Hal, can I go back to the Joe Morgan story? Because I have to admit, I'm sitting here curious. What in the world could you have written about Joe Morgan that would have aggravated him so much?
Well, it was pretty obvious that he was going to leave after the season, and it was late in the season. And I wrote a column saying, it was good that Joe was leaving. They were breaking up the Big Red Machine, and it was good for him to move on because he wasn't going to be part of the future. I mean, I didn't criticize him. I didn't say he was a bad player or anything. I just said it was a good move by the Reds. And so then the next day when I walked in, he pointed his finger at me and said, "Don't you ever try to speak to me again."
Wow. That's really, I guess I had forgotten. Yeah, that would have been after, I guess, the 1980 season, I think,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yeah, when he went to Houston.
When he went to the Astros. Huh,
Right.
that's interesting.
He went back to Houston before he went to Philadelphia?
I think
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
I think that's right. I think
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I
That,
remember that, you mentioned Philadelphia, Randy. I remember the Sports Illustrated cover with Morgan, Rose, and Perez, and they called them the Wheeze kids.
Yeah.
That was awesome. That was my third year of law school. My third year of law school at Notre Dame, and between the finals and graduation, we had a few days off, and we went to Wrigley Field, and the Phillies were playing. So I got to see Pete and Tony and Joe. It was great. It was fantastic.
Hal, who were your favorite players among the Reds over the years?
Well, I have several favorites. Probably my favorite is Jose Rijo. Uh, he and I are still very good friends. I broke my hip a couple of years ago, fell down some steps and broke my hip. Spent 17 days in the hospital doing rehab. And I came home, and I was home a couple of days, and I was sitting in my sunroom one day, and the doorbell rang on the front door. And my wife went to answer the door, and standing in the doorway was Jose Rijo. Came to my house to visit me and brought me some cigars and some T-shirts and stuff, and spent about 2 hours with me. And that's the kind of guy he was. We had a very good relationship. And the other one would be Eric Davis. Eric and I still remain very good friends, and he was such a great player and a great person. And the one story that I wrote in my life that I wish I had never written involved Eric Davis. There was a rumor that he was going to be traded to Philadelphia. And I called my sources in Philadelphia, and they said, well, we're really not interested in him because we hear that he's involved in drugs. Well, stupidly, instead of checking it out, I wrote it right away, saying Philadelphia's not interested. The rumor is Eric Davis is doing drugs. Well, he called. We were in San Diego, and he called me over to his locker and very quietly said, Hal, I'm very disappointed in you for writing something like that. I came from a place in California where drugs were rampant, and I saw what it could do to you. I've never touched drugs in my life. And that was it. He forgot about it. He wrote a book later on, and I thought, oh boy, that story's going to be in the book. And he mentioned me. He mentioned me 2 or 3 times, all positively. Never mentioned that at all. But there was a time when Marge Schott threw me out of the media dining room for writing something that she didn't like, and so Eric sent me pizzas.
Well, that's probably a long list of people Mark Schott got mad at,
Oh, yeah.
at one time or another, I would think.
She threw me out of the dining room 3 different times for stories I wrote.
She was quite a character.
Yes, she was.
Hal, you mentioned you're legally blind, and that's something that I think a lot of people know, but maybe some of our listeners are not familiar with. Can you just tell us a little bit about that situation?
Well, yeah, that's a really great story. It involves Aaron Boone, actually. We were in St. Louis, and it was the last day of a road trip, and I felt something in my right eye. Like when you get something in your eye, and I kept rubbing it, and it didn't come out. So the next day we got home, and my wife took me to the eye doctor, who was a good friend and very talkative, and he examined me, and he got real quiet. And he said, well, I've got good news and bad news for you. And I said, well, what's that? I said, what's the bad news? And he said, the bad news is you've had a stroke of your optic nerve, and nerves will never regenerate, and it's not going to get better. You just hope it doesn't have to get worse. And I said, what's the good news? And he said, well, the good news is it only happens in both eyes to about 10% of the population. So I thought, well, okay. And for a year, my left eye took over. I didn't even notice that I could not see out of my right eye. About 6 months later, just before spring training, I got up one morning and it was in my left eye too. And I told my wife I've just become one of the big 10%ers. So I figured my baseball career was over. This was 2003. And I went to my sports editor and said, I'm going to have to quit. I can't do this. He said, you're not going to quit. You're going to go to spring training and try it. So I said, all right. So I went to spring training and got to Sarasota and went to my condo and checked in. And then I decided I better get out to the ballpark and see how this is going to work. So I went to the ballpark and walked into the clubhouse in Sarasota and stood at the double doors entrance to the clubhouse. And I was looking around and everything was dark and fuzzy, and I couldn't recognize faces. And Aaron Boone, who was a third baseman at the time, I guess saw the consternation on my face and came up and said, "What's wrong with you?" And I told him what had happened, and I said, "You're probably seeing me for the last time. I can't do this. I'm going to go home." Well, he grabbed me by the elbow and led me over to his seat in the club. I says, "You sit down." So I sat down. He pointed a finger at me and said, "I don't ever want to hear you say the word quit again." He said, "You love your job. Everybody in this room will help you out." And he turned me around that day. I would have quit that day. And so
Wow.
when he came up on the Hall of Fame ballot, we know he's not a Hall of Famer. He's just a very good player. But he got one vote for the Hall of Fame, and you know who that came from.
Oh, that's great.
But he
That's
made me
great.
pay for it. He would tell people he caught me talking to a Coke machine.
Do what?
He caught me. He said he caught me talking to a Coke machine.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. You must have. So you recognized early on his potential management qualities, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. He's
Yeah.
a great guy. Great guy.
How long did you continue writing after that and covering the Reds, Hal?
8 more years of traveling. Yeah, 2010. And the only reason I quit then was because the paper decided to quit traveling with the Reds. So they said, "We'll assign you to do something else." And I said, "I don't want to do anything else. I'll just take early retirement." So I took early retirement, and then they offered me a small amount of cash from my salary to continue writing my Ask Hal column on Sundays. And I write columns every once in a while for them.
That's great. So we got some questions that every Reds fan wants to know, and one of them, and I suppose it's back to the forefront right now as a result of the documentary that's out. But should Pete Rose be in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Fanfare. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for what he did on the field, I mean, think about it. 4,200 and some hits. Anybody to match that would have to have 200 hits for 20 straight years. So that's 4,000, and they're still short. I mean, it's just incredible what he did. And yes, he bet on baseball, and it says right on the door of every clubhouse that if you do that, you're banished for life. But wow, he served his penance, and what a great ambassador for baseball he is, and still is, always was, and still is. And to me, I think he belongs.
So I've got a related question. I've just got a related question about Pete, and I have a recollection, Hal, that you were part of a panel commenting on the ESPN movie they made a number of years ago about Pete Rose. Am I right about that?
Yes.
Was that the worst baseball movie ever made in the history of movies?
I don't even watch it.
It was.
The Pete Rose thing is interesting too. We didn't speak for about 20 years. As you mentioned in the intro, I was part of the investigation and had to do the stories, and we had 4 or 5 people at the paper working on it. But I was the front guy. I had to confront him every day and ask him these difficult questions. And Pete and I were very close up until then. And when he got banned, blame the messenger, and he refused to speak to me for about 15 years. So one day, my wife and I are in Las Vegas, and he's in the MGM Grand signing autographs in one of the memorabilia shops. And my wife saw him and said, "There's Pete Rose. Go in and say hello." And I said, "Are you kidding me? You want to start a riot? You go in there and say hello." I said, "No, I'm not going to. He hates my guts." So she pushed me in the door, and Pete jumped up, shook my hand, and had our picture taken together, and got it developed right away and put it in a leather case and signed it to a great Hall of Famer from the hit king, Pete Rose. So
that's great.
That's a great story.
Yeah, so we made up again, and now I'm in contact with him quite often. And the other thing was that was just before the All-Star break, and which is why I was in Las Vegas, and the season started in New York. So we went back to New York, and I walked into the clubhouse, and Dr. Tim Kremchick, who was very close with Pete, was a team doctor, he looked at me and said, "Hey, I hear you saw Pete during the All-Star break." And I said, how now did you know that? And I haven't told anybody. He said, well, Pete called me. And he said, hey, guess who stopped in to see me in Las Vegas? It was Hal McCoy, and I thought he hated my guts.
Oh,
Oh boy.
He used to
that's
say
great.
there.
Hal, what is your favorite memory as a Reds fan? Not as a writer, but more as a fan.
Oh, that's tough because I've been a writer for over 50 years covering them, and that's a tough one. I, I,
I guess that's right. You're not supposed to be a fan while you're a
yeah,
sports
right,
writer.
right, exactly, exactly. I'll tell you an incident that did happen that kind of shook me up when Dave Bristol was managing the Reds. Um, this was like in 1968 or 69, and I wasn't a regular yet, but he was managing the Reds, and I went. Our regular beat writer had an off day, so they sent me. And the beat writer told me, uh, "No, Gary Nolan is on the DL, and he's going to throw in the bullpen. Be sure to ask Dave how he did." So the game ends, and the Reds win like 2-1. Great game. We go in the clubhouse, and I'm this bright young reporter. I'm going to show him, that I'm not. I'm a good guy. I know my job. So the first question I asked Dave was, "How did Nolan do?" He looked at me and he said, "We just won a great damn ball game, and you're asking me about Gary Nolan?" That scared me to death, and I relayed that story to Bristol later on, and he laughed. He said, "I used to love to intimidate young writers."
Wow, that's good. So I'm just curious how, being around a little bit around the team, in the late '60s, did you see it coming? I mean, some people feel like the 1970 team just almost came out of nowhere, but I mean, could you just tell that this was just needed to be put together and was just on the cusp of greatness?
Yeah, you could tell. I don't know about greatness, but you could tell it was going to be a very good team because they had these young players, Pete Rose and Johnny Bench and Tony Perez, and you could tell they were going to be very good. And then when it happened, and I was covering them right from the very start of the formation of the Big Red Machine, I thought, hey, this is how it's going to be all the time.
Yeah.
I was kind of spoiled, and then 1982 hit, and they lost 101 games, and I thought, oh, okay, I see the other end too. But yeah, there'll never be another team like the Big Red Machine, that's for sure.
Yeah, and how do you think that's because of the small market versus large market teams now and the free agency and all of that?
I think it's because of free agency that players move around, that they don't stay. One team can't really build a dynasty. I mean, look how good the Yankees and the Dodgers are, and they haven't won too many World Series.
Yeah, I think the Yankees were the last team to win 3 consecutive World Series, like 98, 99, 2000.
Right. Yep.
And now it's hard to even go back to back.
Yeah. Players just move from team to team to team. You never know. When we were kids, the teams always stayed the same, and you got to know all the players and all the players on other teams too. You could look at a box score, and it would be the same pretty much year after year. And now there's so much movement, you don't know who's playing for who half the time.
Yeah.
And what about analytics? What if you managed a team, Hal? Would you go more with your gut, or would you go with all these fancy statistics like WAR and WRC plus and everything else that most fans don't even know what's up on the scoreboard anymore?
You can include me on that too. I look at those statistics and see some of those abbreviations and I go, what in the heck are these all about? I am, as you might guess, I am old school. I am so old school. I am one-room schoolhouse when it comes to baseball. So analytics, they serve a useful purpose, but I still think that the good managers go by heart and what they see, the old eye test. Statistics are great, but it's a day-to-day game and things change every day.
Now, this is a tough question. Do you think David Bell goes by analytics all the time, or do you think he uses his gut occasionally?
Probably uses his gut occasionally, but mostly it looks like analytics to me. I mean, all I have to do is look at his lineups every day and the changes he makes during the game. It's all by the book and not too much by the seat of the pants.
Yeah, so you covered, several managers. Who's your favorite manager that you've covered?
My favorite man, I have two of them, Lou Piniella and Jack McKeon. Those are two guys that became very close to, and did a lot of things away from the park with both of them, and still in contact with Jack. He's 94 years old and still sharp as a tack. I mean, he acts like he's 64.
Yeah.
But had great times with Jack and with Lou.
I love Lou. He was, I just, that was, I think he got just so much out of that 1990 team. And
Absolutely.
I'll tell you the other interesting thing about that I didn't really realize until I read a very good biography of Billy Martin uh, by, I can't remember the name of the author, but it was very comprehensive, and just how much Martin influenced Piniella in terms of his,
And
just the way
managing.
he managed and what he wanted from his team, and speed and aggressiveness. And when you look back at the '90 team, they were, yeah, that was an aggressive team, man. They would they ran a lot. They took the extra base. I mean, God, Norm Charlton knocking over Sosha.
That was my favorite team. People ask me, what's your favorite team? I'm sure they expect me to say the 76 or 75 Reds, but the 90 team was my favorite team because nobody expected them to do what they did. And as far as Sweet Lou goes, I have a couple of great stories involving Lou and I. Remember the Rob Dibble fight with Lou?
Yeah.
Sure.
I started that one. Dibble didn't pitch one night when he should have, and I asked Lou, how come you didn't use Dibble? And he said, well, before the game, Dibbs told me that he had a little twinge in his elbow. So I went out to Dibble, and I said, what's wrong with your elbow? And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, your manager said he didn't pitch you tonight because you had a twinge in your elbow. And he said, well, the manager's a liar.
Ooh.
So I went into Lou, and I said, your closer just called you a liar. And Lou jumped out of his seat and practically knocked me against the wall and ran out and jumped on Dibble's back, and the fight was on, and I had a great story. and remember when he threw first base into right field?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Umpire made a bad call, and Lou picked up the base and threw it into right field. And unhappy with his distance, he went out and picked it up and threw it again.
Yeah.
So about a month later, the subject came up, and Lou and I are just in his office, and Lou said, "You know what? When I did that, my wife, Juanita, would not speak to me for a week. And if I'd have known that, I'd have done it sooner."
That's fantastic. That's great. Oh my God. Is there anything, if you were owning, if you owned the Reds right now, is there anything that you would do that you feel like they're not doing, or not do what they are doing? I mean, I'm just kind of curious.
I would like to see him spend a little more money on some good free agents. And it's a small market team, but I saw, as a matter of fact, it's in the blog that I posted today, that the Reds' revenue last year and their payroll, they're only spending like 40% of their revenue on payroll.
Mm.
Now, the New York Mets are spending like 88% of their revenue on payroll. So there is money that the Reds can spend, and I would like to see them get a little bit more involved in the free agent market.
I'd like to see them. I think of two guys that played for the, different times for the Reds, but I think of Greg Vaughn in '99, and I think of Roland when he came over in 2009. And I think they could use somebody like that. I think they need a guy like that.
Two great examples, absolutely. Greg Vaughn was an enforcer in the clubhouse. I'll never forget that Brett Tomko was a pitcher, and he was whining about something one day, and I saw Vaughn go over and pick him up by the neck and hold him against the wall with his feet off the ground. So he had command of the clubhouse. And then Scott Rowland was just a great leader by example. He didn't say too much, but what he did on the field and how he prepared and how professional he was a great veteran leadership. And yeah, I agree with you. That's the kind of players that they need. Jonathan India is kind of that kind of player now, but he's young. Hasn't been around like those other two guys have. So, yeah, leadership is so important people underestimate how important that is to have a good veteran presence on your team.
So do you think they could have kept Joey after last season and allowed him, if he would have been able to be a role player?
Yeah, I don't know if he would have been happy with that, but they could have done that. But unfortunately, I think Joey is probably on his last legs as a player, and I'd like to see him come back as a hitting coach. I think he'd be a very good hitting coach, and down the road, I think he'd be a very good manager too. So that would be something to keep in mind.
Interesting.
Okay, Jack, you want to play the word association game? Maybe you want to lead it off.
Yeah. 1975 Reds. What comes to your mind when you hear that?
Camaraderie in the clubhouse and team play.
Jack, I'll follow up with that. Sparky Anderson.
Am I supposed to use one word or?
Nah,
No,
we're not that strict.
Yeah.
No rules on this podcast.
Okay. Sparky Anderson knew how to handle players. They say treat every player alike. He knew how to treat each player differently, knew how to handle them. Great handle of personnel.
2012 Reds.
Oh, Dusty Baker. Great manager, great person. Loved the guy. I wish he'd stayed and hadn't gotten rid of him because the team hasn't been very good since he left.
That's true. That was a tough series, man. I think I jinxed it actually because I had a chance when the Reds came back from San Francisco, where I worked. I could have taken the tickets for one of the three games, and I said, "Nah, I'll wait for the next series."
Jack, one of our old colleagues, Jack, asked me months before that October. It must have been like October 10th or something, Game 5, and he committed me to do a 4:00 in the afternoon presentation in Columbus.
Oh,
And it was Game 5, and I was just like, Jim, can you possibly say I can call in sick? And he was like, no, Randy, we need you to speak. And I was up there giving some presentation with my cell phone in front of me, trying to follow the game and getting madder and madder as I was speaking. Anyway, how about let's go with, we've talked about him a little bit, but let's talk about Eric Davis.
5-tool player who probably would be in the Hall of Fame if he didn't run into so many walls.
It's really a shame he's not in the Hall of Fame.
It really is because he was today's Ellie Dela Cruz. He didn't wear the same number, but same thing. Power, hit for average, great defense, great arm, steal bases.
Yep. Yeah. Marge shot.
Penny pincher. I uttered a line in the press box that everybody broke up and loves. Marge loved her vodka. And she used to take a paper cup down and sit by the dugout with her paper cup of vodka. So in the press box one day, I said, "You know what inning it always is for Marge shot?" And they said, "No, what is it?" I said, "The bottom of the fifth."
Yeah, that's right.
A friend of mine claims that Peter Uberoth was in town for Pete's record-breaking hit, and they were in the box after the game, and Marge says, "Peter, what kind of drink would you like?" And he says, "Gin and tonic." And just before Marge reached into the ice bucket to put some ice in the bottom of the glass, Shotzi went into the ice bucket and went, and it didn't faze Marge one bit. She went down there and reached in some ice and put it in there.
Marge used to bring Shotzi into the media dining room, especially on Sunday mornings when they served breakfast, and she would go behind the counter and they would have a stack of pancakes, and she would go through the pancakes and pull one out and give it to Shotzi. Well, we made sure we ate the pancakes before she got there.
Well, we talked a little bit about him. How about Joey Votto?
Tremendous batting eye. That's the thing I always remember about him. He would not swing at a bad pitch, and he always drew a lot of walks and just an astute hitter.
Did that ever frustrate you as a fan? I mean, like sometimes I think some fans got a little upset, like, oh, swing at a close one, and
Getting on base, that's what you got. That's what baseball's all about, getting on base, and he was a master at that. His on-base percentage was always unbelievable.
Yeah. How about Ellie De La Cruz?
Oh, future Hall of Famer for sure.
Yeah.
Still young, still makes mistakes. As we talked about, trying to steal third base with a 6-0 deficit, but he is just totally electric. Just so much fun to watch. Going back on pop flies to the outfield is he makes some incredible catches. And, when he comes to bat, nobody's going to leave to go to the bathroom, that's for sure, because he might do something you'll never forget.
How about how about one of your fellow sports writers, John Fay? May he rest in peace.
Yeah, John was a good guy. We spent a lot of time together on the road and really enjoyed. You're right. His wife died, and he died shortly thereafter. Just so sad. But John was like me, a very dedicated baseball guy who didn't like to take a game off. Wanted to cover every game, and I was very fortunate to be around him.
Yeah, he really died of a broken heart, I think.
I agree wholeheartedly.
He was a tremendous guy.
Yep, good guy.
Well, Hal, we've taken up a pretty good chunk of your time. I did have one question. I was going to really put you on the spot. This is a kind of hard-hitting question that Hal McCoy probably would ask, but I need to know: do you take La Rosa's or Casanos? Which one's your favorite?
La Rosa's.
Oh, really? The Dayton guy with La Rosa. That's great. That's good to hear.
No, I'm not a big Casanos fan. I don't like that style pizza. I like the La Rosa style.
There we go.
How about Gold Star or Skyline?
Skyline.
Nice.
There's one.
I like how quickly you're answering. I just like there's no hesitation. It's a boom.
Yeah, there's a Skyline right down the street. So regular customers.
Okay. How about Jack? I'm sorry to keep hitting asking these hard-hitting questions, but how about Graders or United Dairy Farmers?
United Dairy Farmers.
Okay.
I'm right with you, Hal.
Yeah. All right, two out of three is not bad, Hal. 2 out of 3 is not bad.
Which one did we disagree on? Casanos?
We disagree on Graders. I'm a Graders guy.
Oh.
I give my granddaughters grief because there's a new place in the Norwood area of Cincinnati called Factory 52, and they've got a Jenny's ice cream, which is a Columbus-based ice cream.
I've heard of it.
And they tell me that's their favorite, and I just say no. Graders. No, we don't do that Jenny's ice cream. You got to be kidding me. So,
well, my favorite restaurant in Dayton is the Oakwood Club.
Oh yeah, I love the Oakwood.
The Oakwood Club is great, and there's a Graders right next door. And when we go out there, people want to stop there, so I have to go in and have Graders too. So I do have it.
Hal, can we take another minute of your time and ask you about your wife Nadine and your 3 sons?
Yeah, she's my angel. She takes care of me. She makes sure that I get everywhere and makes sure that I don't trip and fall all the time. But yeah, she is my guardian angel, and I have 3 great sons. One is a nuclear engineer. He didn't get that from me. He got that from Nadine. And 2 of them played college basketball. Great kids. My oldest son, Brian, is a grandfather. So I'm a great-grandfather a couple of times. And people ask me, does being a great-grandfather make you feel old? And I said, no, that doesn't. What makes me feel old is my son is a grandfather. That makes me feel old.
Well, how hard was that when you had to spend so much time on the road, when your kids were playing sports, growing up high school and even summertime, obviously. How was that as a parent?
Very tough. I missed so much, and that's the one thing that I have regrets about being a baseball writer all my life. Both my boys were very good baseball players, and I very, very seldom got to see them play unless the Reds had an off day and they happened to play. So in the winter, they both played basketball. And probably people ask me the highlight of what I have seen during my sports career. It was one winter night when my son Brent was playing for West Carrollton High School, and they were playing Springfield for the Western Ohio League Championship, and the score was tied with 5 seconds left. Brent hit a three-pointer from the corner to win the game. I threw my notebook straight up in the air. That's the highlight of my career of watching sports.
Well, you had your notebook at the game, or you?
I keep a score. Yeah, I was keeping score. Yeah.
Old habits die hard.
Die hard. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, it's nothing like watching Randy has had some athletes in his family, and some of my kids were athletes, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. It's been, that provided me quite a lot of joy, I can tell you that.
Yeah, mine too. Absolutely.
No question. Well, listen, this was great. Thank you for your time, Hal. Glad we were able to make this happen. You've had a great career, and your willingness to share some of your stories with us means a lot to us. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me on. I enjoyed it. You guys were great.
The whole town's batting about Cincinnati. What a team, what a team, what a team. Each man and lady from 1 to 80, how they scream, how they scream, how they scream.